All right, hello everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Um, we're just gonna wait a minute or two to make sure everyone gets in here on time. Um, we're gonna be talking about detecting and debunking misinformation, and there's a few times during the presentation where you'll be able to respond to questions or ask your own questions. So there's a Q&A box at the bottom that you can use, or you can post things into chat. Just remember that we're all trying to foster a community environment here, so please keep your comments respectful and on topic. So just wait. We'll get started in just 1 second. All right. Okay. All right, so I am Dan Evon with the News Literacy Project, and today we're going to be talking about detecting and debunking misinformation, both AI generated and human made. I'm the Senior Manager of Education Design at the News Literacy Project, and my primary role here is to research and write for the Rumor Guard. If you haven't visited the Rumor Guard, it's rumorguard.org. It's NLP's fact-checking education site where we try to teach people skills that they need to fact-check content online. Before joining the News Literacy Project, I worked as a fact-checker for Snopes, and I did that about 9 years before joining NLP. Been here for a little over a year now. And at Snopes, I wrote fact checks in modern misinformation and conspiracy theories. If you haven't been to Rumor Guard yet, this is the homepage of the site. We address all different sorts of misinformation. It's a great resource if you're learning how to buff up your news literacy skills. And you can join that by visiting the site at rumorguard.org. Or you can also sign up for your email alerts or our text alerts. Our emails come out about once every week, and the texts go up basically whenever we publish an article. Before we get started, I want to pose a question to everybody. And this will be the first and only time that I ask you all to do some math during this presentation. So you can respond to this in the chat, but I would like everyone to consider this question real quick. A baseball bat and a ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than a ball. How much does the ball cost? So the most common answer to this question is that the ball costs 10 cents and the bat costs $1 more. But that would give us $1.20. It's kind of the intuitive lesson versus the instinctual lesson versus slowing down. It's a good illustration of what happens versus fast thinking and slow thinking. The answer here is actually 5 cents. The ball is 5 cents and $1 more is $1.05, which makes $1.10. This is really kind of the point that we want to get across with fact checking and news literacy skills, because the problem is that there's so much information that comes at us that we rely on our instincts too much, and we have to slow down to critically examine content. We're often misled by our first impressions. We look at this question and we might instinctively answer that it's $1 more. But when we actually slow down and think about it, we see that the ball is only 5 cents. One of the problems online is that there is just so much information. Slowing down seems like a simple thing to ask, but it's really not. We come across so much content, and we're kind of forced to make quick assumptions about that content. If you're scrolling on social media, you are inundated with post after post after post, and it can be difficult to slow down and critically examine all the things you come across. It's a really tough problem, and what we're trying to teach you today is some techniques to help you slow down. This is a quote from the Scientific American, which is that information overload, when combined with echo chambers, algorithms, and passive consumption of information, increases our susceptibility to misinformation. So we know that this is a problem. We know that there is just too much information for us to consume responsibly. So how do we get ourselves to slow down? How do we get ourselves to refrain from engaging with content and sharing with content and immediately reacting, being led by our emotions instead of led by critical thinking? So one thing we teach are the 5 factors of fact checking. We will go over all of these individually, but the point that I just want to emphasize, and I'm going to repeat it over and over again, is that these factors are really designed to just help spur critical thinking. We want you to consider the context. We want you to ask if something's authentic or not, if it's based on solid reasoning. We want you to take time to examine the evidence and to consider the source. Now, every rumor that we come across, we're probably not going to ask ourselves 5 questions every time we see a piece of content on social media. There's just too many social media posts for us to do that. But if you keep these in the back of your head and you just, instead of just accepting it for what it is and just accepting it all as true, if you keep these questions with you, you'll see yourself slowing down, and you'll hopefully be less misled by false claims. So let's start with context. So tricks of context are the most common form of misinformation online. If you think of a standard social media post, you have a piece of text and an accompanying image. And that format is something that we're really familiar with. That's like, you see that in educational textbooks. You can consider that with subtitles on movies. When we see a piece of text in an image, we make the assumption that the text is accurately describing what the media is. And we all know that's not the case on social media. Purveyors of misinformation know that we make this trustworthy association, and they exploit it all the time. And that is such a quick and easy form of misinformation to people to make and to spread, and it's something that you will encounter over and over again. So let's take a look at this post, and let's think for a second about what makes this believable. So the caption here is the LA Metro station on Wilshire, Vermont is flooding from the storm. And then this post went viral in August 2023, and it was posted during Tropical Storm Hillary. So let's take a look. So when I think of false context claims, I think there are really 2 reasons why they fool people quite often. And the first is that they use genuine videos and genuine images. So when we deal with manipulated images, and we'll talk about AI later on, but when we talk about doctored images, there's something that sometimes just like feels off, and it kind of raises red flags. But when you're dealing with a genuine video, it's much harder to tell. You're looking at real footage. The other reason is, especially in this case, is that these claims frequently get circulated during breaking news events. This got shared during Hurricane or Tropical Storm Hillary. So there's real news coverage being shared about this storm. There's real photos being shared about the storm. People, their anxieties are high. It's an emotionally tense situation. People are worried about their family and friends. They're seeing all these images of floods. And it's those moments that people tend to exploit. When it's breaking news, you go looking for information. You want to be up to date. So people can exploit that, and they take old videos and they recaption them and they share them online, and they start getting spread. So this is a video, I think it had something like 10 million views, and it also gets reposted by account to account, and it's very easy to get fooled. So just some context of what this actually shows is it shows an amusement park ride at Universal Studios. But you can see how quickly this sort of content can be made. You just take a video and you share it with an unrelated caption. It's very quick to make. It's very easy to spread, and it's something that people are going to encounter over and over again. So it's good to be aware of. So when I think of a claim like that, or a general social media post, I kind of try to break it down into two parts, which is the claim, or what the text is saying it is, and what the actual content itself is. When you're addressing the claim, you're going to do things like lateral reading, which is opening up a new tab and searching for additional information. You want to see if the claim is also being found by credible sources. A lot of the content we come across online is from people we don't know. They're from accounts that we're not familiar with. And if we look to sources that we are familiar with, that we do trust, and we try to compare the information, it's a good way to see if a claim is accurate or not. We'll talk more about evidence later on, but it's not just finding evidence, it's also noting the lack of evidence. When we get to the content side, that's when we use tools like reverse image searches. Google Images, TinEye, and Yandex are all great sites that people should bookmark and use and practice using. And there's also to be something to said about critically examining the content itself. And that brings us to one of my favorite fact-checking techniques, which is removing the frame. So if we have a standard social media post, you have media and you have the caption. And if you get rid of the caption and you can just look at the content itself, that sometimes tells you a lot about what you're seeing. A lot of these posts involve fabrications and falsehoods and sheer assertions. And when you look at the actual video, sometimes you can notice that mismatch. So here is a post where I have removed the frame. So let's take a look here and just consider what it is that we're seeing. So, not sure about all of you, but I'm pretty sure I just saw a fly. It's a video of a person holding a fly out in a field somewhere, and that's what that showed. I spent a lot of time up in northern Wisconsin, and I'm pretty sure this is a horsefly, which have very painful bites, which is irrelevant, but that's all it is, right? It's a fly. But if we go to how it's presented on social media, we see a completely different claim. Someone is claiming that it's a drone fly used by the US military. Now, there's nothing in that video that suggests that it's a drone. There's not any inclusion of someone using a remote. There's not video of them being manufactured. There's no show of mechanics. There's no show of like the screen that you might see. There's no news articles. There's nothing that indicates that this is a drone. But when you encounter a claim like this online and you see the caption first, you're primed to believe it. You see this is a polymer drone from the military, and then you watch the video and you're primed to see that as real. So when we remove the frame and just view the content as itself, we can make our own conclusions before we can be influenced by these people who are spreading falsehoods. All right, so here is another photo or image that we can take a second to kind of consider if it is an authentic image or not. This is supposedly shows two daredevils playing tennis on a flying airplane at 1,000-meter altitude, Los Angeles, 1925. So everyone just take a look and kind of come to a conclusion, whether you think it is real or whether it's fake. And I guess I'll spoil things now that this is a genuine photograph. These are two people that are really standing on the wing of a plane. There's no ball. They're not actually playing tennis, but these were a set of stunt performers. I believe one's name is Gladys Roy and the other is Ivan Unger. But these were they were part of a group of stunt workers that did barn burning shows, which is basically airplane stunts. They hung from the bottom of airplanes, and they did all sorts of incredibly dangerous early aviation sort of stunts. Now, the reason I show this is because we make a big deal of critical observation, of looking at content, looking at media, and looking for the telltale signs of whether something's fake, whether the shadows are off, or whether the person has too many fingers. But we can't just rely on the naked eye. We have to look for more evidence than that. When we look at something like this, we can make an assumption. We can say we think it is real or we think that it's fake, but we really need to find evidence to prove that. So critical observation is a key aspect of being news literate, but it's really not enough. Not enough. It's kind of the first step in a longer process. So let's talk about authenticity. The ability to determine whether something is real or genuine, has been doctored or fabricated, is a fundamental fact-checking skill. So the false context claims, they deal with authentic media, which is one of the reasons why they're so convincing. But a lot of the stuff online is just either manipulated or straight up fabricated. So manipulated content is when we take a genuine photograph and we manipulate it. We add some digital alteration to it. And this is, it can be found on all sorts of claims, but two things that are prominently featured are signs and t-shirts. If you ever see a celebrity in a overtly political shirt, chances are that it's fake. And chances are that it was made by someone that is trying to sell you a t-shirt. Those are ads more than anything else. But manipulated content is when we digitally alter something that already exists. And that is, so in this, we see that on the right, that's the original photo. And on the left is the doctored content. So some manipulated content is really obvious, it's really in your face, but other things are much more subtle, and the subtle claims are really the ones that are kind of the trickiest. So here's a video that has been digitally manipulated. So I'm going to play it again because it's a little difficult to see. But when this ball goes to LeBron James, it looks like he doesn't dribble and he runs from basically half court towards the rim. The person who made this digitally deleted the dribble, so it just looks like he's holding the ball. It's a really subtle edit. It looks really convincing. And when you factor in things like confirmation bias, it's really easy to get fooled by it. So for any sports fans who are watching now, there's a common conception that the NBA does not call traveling fouls. And if you believe that, if that's your viewpoint, you come across like a video like this and it confirms that belief. And anytime that I have been fooled by a piece of content online, I probably like 99% of the time it's because of confirmation bias. I think that the NBA doesn't call things like traveling. I see this video, it confirms that belief, and it's really easy to just accept that. When our beliefs are confirmed, we don't think that they need to be critically examined. So we just kind of accept it and then move on. So confirmation bias is the natural tendency of people to readily accept any information, even false, that agrees with or reinforces their existing beliefs. So I use this sports example because it's light and not politically heated in any ways, but you can see how that happens with all sorts of other issues. When we develop strong opinions about things, we readily believe the content that confirms those opinions. So one more thing about manipulated content is that it's the type of content that lends itself best to reverse image searches. And the reason for this is that manipulated content starts with an original photograph. If you look, like in this case, this is, I think it was last summer when there was stories about balloons being flown overhead, and somebody's shared this image. But when we plug this into a reverse search engine, such as tinimages.google.com or Yandex, they can find the original image, because that's what manipulative content is. There's an original source photograph that can be traced back to. And that's not the case with all sorts of digital fakes, like this image. This is an image that supposedly shows the Eiffel Tower on fire, and this is an AI-generated image. Reverse image searches are great tools, but they don't work all that well with AI-generated content, and there's a few reasons for that. Unlike manipulated content, AI is its own source. It's not a manipulation of something else. So you can't really trace it back to its source. You're just going to see more postings of this image. AI is also new in a general sense, and it's also tends to be made on a case-by-case basis. You'll start to see more old AI images getting circulated, but in general, the content's made and then it's shared. So reverse search engines need time to archive content. So if something is made and shared that same day, you're not going to have a lot of help with these reverse image searches. So we have to look for other ways to debunk this content. So we need to find evidence or a lack thereof. So misinformation lacks sound evidence by its very nature, but it often tricks people into either overlooking that fact or into accepting faulty evidence. Many false claims are sheer assertions and lack any pretense of evidence, while others present digital fakes out of context for support. Evaluating the strength of evidence for a claim is a key fact-checking skill. So if we think about the Eiffel Tower image, or when we encounter any other sensational image or claim online, one thing that I recommend for people to do is to ask themselves this rhetorical question. If that image is true, if that claim is true, what else would need to be true? If we think of the Eiffel Tower photo, if this was real, what else would need to be true? There would be breaking news coverage all over the place. There would be news articles. There'd be photos and videos from other people on social media showing the fire from different angles. There'd be statements from local officials. There'd be police reports and fire departments warning people to stay away. There would likely be statements from world leaders, expressing solidarity or support as to recover from the Eiffel Tower being destroyed. But none of that happens. So when you see that lack of evidence, it's a good indicator of whether something is real or not. Here's another example about a proposed diet from the World Economic Forum. If you're not aware of these sort of claims, congratulations. It's a conspiracy theory that people are going to start forcing people to eat insects and not to eat meat. And this is one piece of that conspiracy, one piece of content that pushes that conspiracy theory. Now, it contains the World Economic Forum logo because it wants to present itself as official. But if you go to look at the WEF site or their social media accounts, you're not going to find this graph because it doesn't exist. If you look at the social media posts that are sharing this chart, you're not going to see supporting links because there is none, because it's a fabrication. So not only do we have to look for evidence to support claims, but noting the lack of evidence is also good to note, and it also can lead us in the right direction to determine if something is authentic or not. That brings us to reasoning. So misinformation is often designed to exploit our cognitive biases and vulnerabilities to logical fallacies. A lot of the content that we see online just doesn't pass the smell test. We all have lived experience. We all, have been on this planet. We all kind of have an idea of how things work. And sometimes we come across content that just doesn't make sense logically. So let's look at a few examples that might be out of the scope of reason. So one of the mantras, especially when it comes to addressing conspiratorial claims, is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If you look at this picture that supposedly shows an old photograph from the 1800s of somebody's family member and Bigfoot. There are a lot of logical problems with this claim. If this was real, you would expect that there would be other archival information. If Bigfoot was real, you would think that you would have other sorts of sightings or documentation. So sometimes we can see a claim and we can just see that it doesn't really make sense logically. Cognitive bias is a natural error in reasoning and thought processes that can cause people to misinterpret information, leading to distorted perceptions of events, irrational judgments, and false beliefs. One way that reasoning comes into how we factor, how we address falsehoods, is how it gets exploited during breaking news events. This is a group of claims that circulated shortly after Damar Hamlin collapsed during a Monday Night Football game last January 2023. Within minutes of his collapse, people started blaming that on the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, what they're doing is they're exploiting a gap of information. There's this gap between the moment that news breaks and when reporters can answer all the questions that we have. When something happens, people want information. They want answers to all the questions they have, and sometimes that information just isn't available. It takes reporters time. They have to talk to people. In this case, he's still on the field when these claims start circulating, but they have to gather evidence. They have to talk to doctors, and in this case, coaches or players. They have to collect all that information. And while they are doing that, while they are doing the reporting to give us an accurate picture of what happened, that gap in information is being filled with falsehoods. And these claims are appealing because we want to know the answers. We want to know what happened, and people provide that. There's an old saying that a lie goes halfway around the world before the truth gets its boots on, and you can see that all the time with these sort of claims. It doesn't take any time to create a falsehood. You can just type a sentence and hit post, and all of a sudden you are supplanting the truth with this false information. So when we get into a situation like this, it's just important to note that sometimes the information that we want is not available. In this instance, nobody knew what happened in the immediate aftermath. In fact, it took months until he actually released his medical diagnosis. But so nobody knew. And the people that are claiming they did, like the people in this screenshot here, they were lying to you. All right, let's talk about the source. So not all sources of information are created equal, but can be easy to glaze over the significant differences while scrolling through feeds online. Checking the source is probably the quickest and easiest thing that we can do when scrolling on social media. Just clicking on a person's account can give us a good idea of the type of content that they share. It's not always going to provide the answer. It's not always going to let you know whether a piece of content is fake or not. But if you want to add one easy, quick fact-checking skill into your normal social media diet, taking note of who is sharing the content with you is quick and easy and often reveals a lot of information about the content that you're seeing. So let's look at this post. Sorry, this is a LeBron heavy slide, but let's take a look at this post about LeBron James going to the premiere of Barbie. So this is an AI generated image. And if we look at the image, there's a lot of things that just seem off. There's no texture on this plant, right? Same thing with his skin and his shoes. Everything's just overly smooth. It just seems suspect. And so you can look at this and maybe you make the assumption that something's off here and it doesn't really compute. But there's a much more obvious sign that this is fake. If we look at the source, the account that's sharing this, it is called Butt Crack Sports, which is not a legitimate news source. If we click on that site, they openly admit that. They say that they are a satire site. They don't tweet things that are factual. They tweet jokes. When this was going around, there was a bunch of images of celebrities going to the Barbie premiere. And because there was that trend, people started making fake images. So we don't want to rely on our naked eye to make these determinations. But sometimes when we just check the source, just a quick click on the account, we can determine whether something is real or fake. So another aspect of source deals with imposter content. So imposter content is misinformation that falsely uses a well-known name, brand, or logo to fool people into believing that it is authentic content. So one of the common forms of this is fake news headlines. You'll take a well-known logo, like a CNN logo, you kind of format it the way that their articles look, and then you add a fake headline. And again, this is a convincing form of misinformation because when you look at this, it looks just like a CNN article. Of course, if you go to the CNN website, you're not going to find this article there because this is an example of imposter content. Another common way for this is fake social media posts. People will put out, pretend to be a politician or a celebrity to put out some sort of statement, and that statement doesn't exist. So when we're scrolling online, tracing things back to their source, like if you came across this image of the CNN news article, instead of taking the screenshot of what they're claiming the news article to be, go to the website and look there, see if the actual source of the content exists. And the same thing goes with social media posts. Go to the actual account and see if you can find it, because a lot of people will claim that a piece of imposter content is genuine. Yeah, imposter content is a way that people launder opinions. You'll see this also in fake quotes where they'll put an image of Morgan Freeman as someone is at the center of a lot of these, where they will put his image next to words. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to launder opinions through a credible source. If you like Morgan Freeman, you might also like this opinion. In this case, they're doing the opposite, where they're trying to malign a source. They're trying to say that, this source is bad because look at what they're reporting. So let's talk a little bit more about AI generated content. So these images here are all AI generated. They went viral last summer, and they purport to show a sunburn contest, I believe somewhere in Florida. Now, if we take a closer look at these images, which I know probably nobody wants to do, but we can see some visual oddities here, right? The man in the center, the back of his neck looks like something that could be a mistake from a computer error. It looks like a glitch. The man in the top right, his face is a little smushed, and you can look at his hand where it doesn't seem to be rendered correctly. And over on the left, just is an image that kind of gets weirder the more you look at it. You look in the background, and people's bodies just don't appear like bodies. There's a lot of just visual oddities. And this is only from, maybe 10 months ago, and it's already pretty realistic. And in the time since these went viral, they have gotten better and better. And I won't say that you can't tell, but it is getting more and more difficult to tell whether or not AI images are generated just by looking at them. And to help show that, let's take a little test and look at some AI generated content versus real content. So let's see if we can tell which image is real here and which image is the AI generated image and which one is the real photo. Again, feel free to answer in chat if you think it's A or B here. So we're seeing a lot of support for B and some A's, but let's see which one's real. So B is the real photo there. Let's do another one. Same game. Which image is real and which one is AI generated? This supposedly shows, a bunch of people near a beachside property. And I guess I'll play along too, and I'm gonna go with A. Let's see. All right, A was correct that time. AI generated one is B. All right, I think I have one more of these. All right, we have people responding to a fire. We have one is an AI image, and one is a real photograph. So let's see what we got here. All right, in this case, the image on the left was the one that was AI generated. And the reason I bring this up, and the reason why I really don't like these sort of quizzes is because it really relies on guesswork. I didn't look through the chat closely enough to see if anybody answered all of them correctly, but I would doubt that that's the case. I think in each one of these instances, it's really hard to tell which one is real and which one's the fake. And that is becoming more and more common as these get better and better. The reason that I don't like these quizzes is because the content that we come across online doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's always more context. We can look at who's sharing the account, whether it's a credible source. We can look for other places that have shared the image. We can see if it comes from a credible news agency. Comparing it just with our naked eye is really tough, and we have to look for additional context. So let's take a look at this image. This is a AI generated image of former President Donald Trump, who appears to be sleeping. This went viral last week after news reports circulated that he had fallen asleep during the trial. Now, just looking at this image, I find it hard to tell that this was created with AI. It looks pretty convincing to me. You might be able to do some pixel peeping and might be able to find something that you think is a telltale sign that it's AI generated. But overall, it's a pretty convincing image. But when we look at the surrounding context, we can see that this photo just can't exist. There were no photos allowed during the trial. Photos were allowed before the trial and after the trial, but nobody was allowed in the courtroom to take photos. We have to rely on courtroom sketches. It doesn't come from a credible news outlet or a reporter. This was just posted by random people making political attacks at somebody, for President Trump. It wasn't included in news reports about the trial. And if you look at from photo agencies, the people who would actually have access to take this sort of photo, it's not found on Getty or Reuters or the Associated Press. So this image by itself is convincing, but when we consider the surrounding context, we get an idea that this is probably not a real image. All right, so this is another AI generated image, and this is an AI generated image of President Biden, dressed in military fatigues, announcing strikes on numerous enemies. Now, you could go through the same kind of logical practice here by asking yourself questions about, where did this image come from? Is it from the White House official count? You could ask yourself, does the president actually put on military fatigues when performing a military action? They don't. You can kind of do the same exercise that we did with President Trump. Now, I talked earlier about reverse image searches and how they don't really work for AI generated content. The good news is that people are developing AI image detectors, which work very similar. You take an image, you plug it into the search engine, and it will tell you its level of confidence of whether or not it is an AI generated image. So this is something called Truth Media, which this one is actually not available to the public yet, but there are similar tools online that you can find. But you see that you plug the image in, and then it runs various analysis on it, and it will tell you what it suspects. So the top three here are saying with 100% confidence this is an AI generated image. So these tools aren't very widespread yet, but it is a way that people are starting to address AI generated content. So be on the lookout for those. Now, when we think of AI generated content, we frequently think of images that we just saw, right? That's generally the medium that people think of. But one of the most troublesome aspects of this technology deals with audio. People can make very convincing voice clones of celebrities and politicians or anybody who has their voice recorded publicly. So we're going to look at a video, and this is a video of Governor Greg Abbott. And it has a doctored AI voice clone, but the reason why it is so convincing is because the first 10 seconds of this video are Greg Abbott's actual voice. They took a clip, I believe this is Fox News, they took a clip from Fox News of Abbott talking about the border, I believe it is, and they use real footage at the start. So you are getting, just like in the false context situation with real video, you're getting this convincing set of images. And then once the camera cuts away, the voice clone takes over. And you might be able to hear it, but it's pretty convincing. So let's take a listen.
Joe Biden has eliminated all of the 4 policies that Donald Trump put in place that led to the lowest illegal border crossings in 40 years. If only President had been dealing with real internal problems and not trying to play with Putin, from whom he needs to learn how to work for national interests, then everything would have been different. He needs to follow immigration laws. And if the Biden administration was enforcing the immigration laws passed by Congress, the mayors of New
So you can see how audio, there's a lot more deceptive tactics that people can use to spread these fake audio clips in a really convincing package. You know, you start with a real set of images, and then you transition into a voice clone. And it can be very easy to be fooled by that.
Joe Biden
and sometimes you don't even need the visual. This is a story from last week, I believe, where somebody shared leaked audio, is what they claim, of a person making racist and derogatory remarks. And it was an AI generated clone. Earlier this year, there was a robocall that was generated with AI of President Biden that was fake. These things are really hard to detect. And it's one of the reasons why we have to put more emphasis on credible sources and have to put more faith in the journalists that do the work to verify information. There are going to be times where fake audio goes viral, and it's going to be very hard for people to tell what is real or not. And practicing a little patience and a little restraint and waiting for people to verify sources of where the audio came from or how it's being spread can really go a long way to stopping these things spread too much. So I want to pose a question to everybody, and just to think about a time that you were fooled by misinformation. This happened to me just this week, so I'll share something in a second, but But everyone gets fooled by these claims from time to time. So just, yeah, take a second to think about a time that you were fooled by misinformation. So I mentioned this earlier, but when I get fooled by claims online, it's almost always because I am mindlessly scrolling and something confirms a preconceived beliefs. Something feels true, and I'm not really paying attention. I'm scrolling and I see a claim and it makes me laugh or makes me angry or makes me sad or it elicits some emotion, and then I scroll to the next claim. So this is a video that went viral last week of musician John Mellencamp, and it was shared online as if he had stormed off stage after he gave a pro-Biden speech and then was heckled by the crowd. So let's take a listen here.
Real quiet.
Oh. You don't know me. Hey, Joe, find this guy and
So
see that.
I don't know if that was hard for you all to hear. That was hard for me to hear. I'm not sure if the audio worked well for that one, but basically, someone yells out for Mellencamp to play music, and then there's a little bit of an altercation. And I was scrolling on social media and I saw this post, and I was taken in by it. It felt real. It's a celebrity making a political statement, and then it's an audience that is reacting negatively to that, and that felt real to me. And I clicked, I believe the hashtag was just Mellencamp, and I clicked on that, and there were a whole bunch of posts of people sharing this video, and everything about it felt real. It wasn't until a few days later that USA Today published a fact check that noted that this had nothing to do with politics. Mellencamp was telling a story about his grandma, and somebody wanted him to play music and yelled out for him to play music, and then they got into a little altercation. It was not politically related at all. And I think that's when we talk about earlier about removing the frame. If you got rid of that caption and you watch the video, you notice that he doesn't say Biden, he doesn't say Trump, he doesn't say elections or anything political. But that caption at the beginning sets you up to view the content in a certain context, and it's misleading, and it's really easy to get taken in by it. So one of the reasons I like to ask people about when they get fooled by misinformation, especially when it's something about confirmation bias, is because oftentimes when people get fooled by something, their response is, it might as well be true. You look at a claim, whatever it is, you got taken in by it because it felt true, and even though the claim is false, that bigger truth still rings accurate to you. And when we start thinking that way, we start being led by our opinions instead of by evidence. So just something to keep in mind when we walk away from the session today is, if you find yourself in that bucket, if you find yourself justifying by saying, it might as well be true, it's a good time to kind of level set and to see if your beliefs are still in line with what is actually going on. To me, this claim really speaks to politically divisiveness, and I don't think that it being disproved says that there is not political divide, but maybe the people that are lying about this, the falsehoods that they're spreading, the divisions that they're trying to create, it's good to take note of that and to kind of level set your beliefs. So we're just about at the end here, and I think we have a time for a few questions. But what I would really love for people to take away is just to practice slowing down. The internet's fast. There is a ton of content out of there, content that comes at us every day. And a lot of times we get fooled by it because we don't give ourselves the time to critically examine the content. We simply see it, accept it, and move on. If you want to be informed, if you don't want to be fooled by this sort of stuff, you have to be an active consumer. You can't just take these rumors as they are. Checking the source is a habit that you can build into your routine that is an extra 3 seconds. Just clicking on the account's name to see who they are and what sort of content they share. We have to be active consumers. When we're passive consumers, when we just let this information come, that's when we get fooled. And a good way to slow ourselves down is to consider the 5 factors. Consider the context, the authenticity, whether it's based on solid reasoning, it's based on solid evidence, and what is the source. So I hope everyone learned a little bit today. If you keep an eye on your emails, we'll be sending out a link to a survey and some of the resources that we mentioned. But I believe we have a little bit of time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Let's see. Yes. Well, someone asked if we can include some AI detection tools. I'll make sure that Allie sends out some links. I believe there's one that calls Hive Media that does a good job with that. And someone asked about what removing the frame means. So I guess I can briefly recap that. So I guess what I mean by that is almost everything on social media is being framed by someone. And what I mean by that is that if you have a news article and then you have a news article being shared, whoever is sharing that is expressing an opinion. They're priming you how to think about a piece of content. If we think about false context claims where you have a fake image of LeBron James going to Barbie, you have someone sharing that is telling you what you should see, what you should expect when you view that piece of content. And sometimes it's helpful just to view the content on its own, because a lot of times the frame and the actual content don't match. So if someone shares a video, I don't know why this is coming to mind, but there's videos of protesters at Climate Earth protesters who laid down on the ground in body bags, and they're alive and they're at a protest and they sit up. And that gets shared with all sorts of conspiratorial claims. This is actually a bad example, probably. All I'm trying to say with the framing is that when you get to social media posts, the text doesn't always accurately describe the content. So examining those 2 things separately is sometimes a good idea. Since I kind of botched that question, let's see if there's anything else. Is Google more reliable than, say, Bing for misinformation research? And then the last one is, does reporting bad content on platforms help? So I think when it comes to search engines, it really comes to the same thing with news sources. You know, it's always a good idea to get information from more places. I use Google. I find Google helpful, so I wouldn't recommend about not using them. But they don't always surface the most accurate information first. Sometimes if you search for, if you encounter a claim online and you kind of copy and paste the text of the claim and search on Google for it, sometimes it'll just show you more people that are repeating that claim and not a fact check. So I don't know if I have a preference between which search engine to use, but I would say that it is good to compare sources. If you put in a search term into Google and then you also put one into Bing or Yahoo and see what search results, I think that's a great practice. And then does reporting misinformation help on platforms? I would say yes. Platforms do different jobs on how they address social media content. but like for Twitter or X, for example, with their community notes, I think there's a lot of room for improvement there, but I do think that flagging content does help people address that misinformation. It does like kind of throw up a bat signal for both the tech platforms and for the people who are kind of monitoring this information to see what to look for. So I guess if we're comparing liking or sharing or engaging with bad content versus flagging it as misinformation, I do think that helps a lot. So I think that's something that you could continue to do. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you all learned something, and yeah, we will be sending out an email with a survey. I'll make sure to include AI image detection links and some of the other resources that were mentioned today. But yes, thanks again for coming. We really appreciate your participation today. Thank you.